Second means sincere humility. Jesus Christ, says St. Augustine, does not say to us, learn of me to work miracles, but learn of me because I am meek and humble of heart. Matthew 11:29. In order to show us that without humility there can be no true piety, people are sufficiently persuaded of the necessity of this virtue. The difficulty is to know in what true humility consists. Many people think themselves truly humble if they have a low opinion of themselves, but they are not pleased when others have the same opinion of them. It is not enough to know to know when to it is not enough to know that we have no virtue or merit. We must believe it and be satisfied when others believe it. The first step towards acquiring this virtue is to demand it constantly from God. The next It is not enough to know that we have no virtue or merit, but we must believe it and be satisfied when others believe it. The first step towards acquiring this virtue is to demand it constantly from God. The next, to convince ourselves of our imperfections by frequent and serious reflection on ourselves, the remembrance of what we have been and of what we might have become without the grace of God are powerful helps to keep us humble. Really good people think little about others, but pay attention to themselves. Really humble people are not scandalized because their weakness is perfectly known to themselves. They see themselves so near the abyss and fear so much to fall in that they are not surprised that others do fall in. The less one speaks of oneself, the more one is in conformity with true humility. An affected claim to have a low opinion of ourselves is often for the purpose of making people praise us. The truest marks for the purpose of making people praise us, the truest marks of humility are to cherish those who despise us, not to avoid the humiliations which present themselves, not to take pleasure in vain thoughts and projects about the future which serve only to nourish secret pride, never to speak in praise of ourselves, never to complain of what God permits to happen to us or wish to be pitied, not to be troubled about our faults, to execute the faults of our neighbors, to defer in everything to others, to distrust ourselves in undertaking, and to have a low esteem of what we accomplish. Finally, to pray much and speak little. When we know that we are miserable, we do not mind being despised, because we know it is just. A humble man always thinks he is justly dealt with, however badly he may be treated. He says that those who maltreat him are right, and that they are of the same opinion of God and his angels. A man who has deserved hell should find that contempt is due to him. We do not mean to say that we should receive humiliations with sensible pleasure, for contempt is naturally disagreeable, but not to complain, to be silent when despised, to thank God for contempt and pray for those whom He has permitted to humiliate us, whatever repugnance it may cost us, are certain marks of true humility. We have said St. Paul, the love of humility and objection of a hidden and obscure life is a great remedy for such evils. We shall have no peace if we do not forget ourselves. If we wish to be perfect, we must forget even our own spiritual interest in order to seek only the pure love, the pure glory of God, love of God. Fuck. Mm, mm. Alright. The joy and sweetness which are inseparable from the exercise of humility and mortifications. We have seen that there can be no true devotion without universal, generous, and constant mortification, the true humility, but it is possible to speak continuous contentious mortification and humility without frightening those who desire to love Jesus Christ ardently. Will they not immediately cry out against such a dreary prospect? Can they envisage a life filled with crosses without being deterred? It is not an unhappy sort of life to be continually acting contrary to our natural inclinations, allowing our senses only bare necessities, forbidding them everything else. Um, Okay, I'm just allowing our senses only bare necessities, forbidding them everything else, and living in retirement and silence without seeking the applause of the world or being concerned about its contempt. But it is just those people who live in this manner who assure us that they are perfectly happy. The world says that this kind of life is unsupportable, but Jesus Christ himself tells us that it is sweet, easy, and full of joy and consolation. St. Francis de Sales calls this kind of life the sweetness of sweetness. St. Ephrem, while living a great mortification, being filled with interior consolations, cried out, "It is enough, oh my God, it is enough. Thou dost overwhelm me with thy benefits. Moderate thy liberty. If thou dost not wish me to if thou dost not wish me to die, for the infallible consolations which I experience in thy service are capable of causing my death." St. Francis Xavier, writing from Japan to the Jesuits in Europe, said, "I am in a country where I lack all comforts of life, but I experience such interior consolations that I am in danger of losing my eyesight from weeping for joy." All the saints give a little testimony. Surely so many millions of holy men and women, whom we admit to be wise and sincere, have not conspired to tell us something in contradiction to what they have thought and experienced. But if the continual exercise of mortification makes people so unhappy as worldlings contend, how is it that the happiest people that we can find are those who are the most mortified? How is it that we find no people in the world who are perfectly content and perfectly happy, but those who are mortified? If a mortified life itself does not produce this unalterable joy, by what artifice do these people keep themselves all their lives in perfect peace of mind and tranquillity, that no accident of life can disturb? If if it is by dissimulation, how is it that the people of the world, who know so well the art of dissimulation, have not been able to hide their worries and disappointments. Although they pass the most of their lives in pleasure and amusement, virtue alone, says St. Augustine, although it has an austere appearance, possesses the power of making people taste real happiness. There is no perfect happiness in this world except for those who labor seriously to sanctify themselves, being exempt from the sway of the most cruel passions which tyrannize, 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 oh my gosh, over the wicked. They experience greater sweetness in life and less worry, being under perfect submission to the will of God. They enjoy profound calm and peace, such as the world cannot give. This sweet repose of conscience is the ordinary fruit of virtue. Generosity with God ensures a large share of his holy joy, while niggardliness in his service diminishes it to the vanishing point. Language fails us to describe the secret unction with which God sweetens the yoke of his law, the unhappy moments when he makes holy souls feel his divine presence, the sweet hope which makes them taste in advance the joy of heaven, the ray of light which allow them to see the vanity of the world in its true colors, and the consolation and the consoling tears which they sometimes shed at the foot of the crucifix, in which are to be found a pleasure more pure, more exquisite than in the most delightful feast of the world. These pleasures and these interior consolations, which surpass all understanding, are mysterious mysteries hidden from tepid souls. For for them all it for them all is for them all this is a strange language, but says St. Augustine, give me a fervent soul, a truly humble and mortified person, a heart penetrated with the love of Jesus Christ, and he will understand what I say. It is true that although a person be perfect, he is not always insensible to all the accidents of life. Afflictions may cause the just man some mental suffering, but they cannot make him dis- disconsolate. His virtue always comes to his relief, although there are no crosses in evidence on the broad road followed by the tepid. Everything will contribute to produce them, while he crosses while if crosses are met with on the narrow way trodden by those who love Jesus Christ ardently, heaven and earth will eagerly combine to render them sweet, and the Son of God himself will deign to assist in carrying them and making the burden light. Finally, the very thought of death terrifies worldlings, while it consoles and even rejoices the virtuous. At the hour of death, when things appear in their true colors, do we ever find people who regretted that they have been mortified, that they have led a perfect life? Assuredly, perfect mortification must have attractions that we know not of, because we are not perfectly mortified. Our cowardice will allow us to do only as much as will make us feel the pain, but not sufficient to taste the sweetness. It would appear that we are distrustful both of what the saints tell us and of what Jesus Christ himself has promised us. We would wish to be paid beforehand, and we are ignorant of the fact that in this matter it is only the first step that counts. That is to say, that the whole difficulty consists in making up our mind to be mortified. Taste, says the prophet, and then you will see. In this the eyes deceive us. We should judge only by taste. Those who have seen the promised land only from afar were terrified, and said that it is devoured, that it and said that it devoured its inhabitants. But those who had been there said quite the contrary, that it was a land flowing with milk and honey. 1 Numbers 13:28. A great servant of God gives this advice: make this perfect sacrifice for the whole fortnight. The object sought after, namely God's peace and consolation, must be of very little value. If it is not worth this experiment, if after the for if after a fortnight continuous and perfect mortification you experience none of the sweetness that others have experienced, I will allow you to say that those who love Jesus Christ truly are traveling by the wrong road, and that the yoke of Christ is heavy, who have reason to be astonished that people find difficulty and they are walking with Christ, and believing that happiness can be found in continual mortification, when they see every day so many people in the midst of all kinds of amusements unhappy and discontented. If there are visible sufferings, uh, is it not possible that there are secret consolations? Blas Claude de la Colombier, the with the permission of his superiors, had made a vow to observe all the rules of his order, and, in particular, he had he had bound himself to practice continual mortifications in all things. What will those people who regard the three vows of the religious life as an insupportable burden think of the life of this great servant of God? Will they not think that it must have been very unhappy? The following, however, is what he himself wrote in his journal of spiritual retreats, where, after the example of these holy men, who are always making plans for further advance in future, he recorded the sentiments with which God had inspired him, and the graces which he conferred on him, in order to remind himself of his obligation of thanking God of these favors, and of stimulating himself to love God daily more. On the sixth day he writes, When I was considering the particular vow which I had made, I found myself filled with great gratitude to God, who gave me the grace to make this vow. I had never before sufficient I had never before sufficient leisure to consider it properly. I experienced great joy at seeing myself bound with 1,000 chains to do the will of God. The thought of this obligation, far from terrifying me, filled me with the intense joy. Far from being made a slave by it, I felt that I had entered the kingdom of liberty and peace. When I am alone with myself, he continued, I feel myself, through the infinite mercy of God, enjoying a liberty of heart which causes me incomparable joy. Nothing, it seems to me, is capable of making me unhappy. I feel no attachment to anything, at least at these times. But this does not prevent me from feeling the promptings of nearly all the passions. However, a moment's reflection is sufficient to calm them. I have often tasted great interior joy from the thought that I am in the service of God. I have realized that this worth infinitely I have realized that this is worth infinitely more than the favor of kings, the occupation oh